They had not expected a human to arrive alone. The delegation chamber of the Kepri Accord was built for spectacle and intimidation. A cathedral of curved obsidian walls and bioluminescent veins that pulsed with the slow rhythm of alien hearts. Delegates from 12 civilizations hovered, perched, or stood upon gravitic platforms, their translators humming softly as they exchanged pheromones, light pulses, and subsonic murmurs. At the center waited the human chair, oversized and deliberately exposed, placed under a column of white light. The invitation had been clear. Send one representative, unarmed, to negotiate the terms of humanity's compliance. They expected a diplomat polished by committees, a mouthpiece trained to concede. When Elias Ward walked in, wearing a simple dark coat with no insignia, no escort, and no visible technology, the chamber fell into a rare silence that translators could not fill. He placed his hands on the back of the human chair and breathed, as if grounding himself in the weight of the moment. Then he sat without asking permission. The Kepri speaker unfurled its segmented crown, facets catching the light like knives. Its voice emerged as a chorus layered through the translator, calm and final. The Accord welcomes the human envoy. You have been summoned to hear the terms that will prevent unnecessary loss. Elias raised his eyes then, and those closest to him felt something shift. Not a threat, not bravado, but a clarity that made the air feel thinner. He nodded once. I'm listening, he said, and his voice carried without amplification, steady and unadorned. The speaker continued, outlining the familiar calculus of empire. Humanity's expansion had crossed protected corridors. Human fleets were numerous but inefficient. Human worlds were vibrant but undisciplined. Compliance would ensure protection, technological uplift, and a seat as a junior partner. Refusal would result in containment, selective strikes, and the slow erosion of human autonomy until resistance became statistically irrelevant. It was delivered without malice, the way a storm explains rain. Elias did not interrupt. He let the terms settle into the chamber, watched the reactions ripple through alien bodies, unused to human stillness. When the speaker finished, the translator chimed softly, signaling completion. The speaker inclined its crown. You may respond. Elias leaned back in the chair, exhaled, and smiled. Not wide, not mocking, but with a sadness that confused the watchers. Thank you for the honesty, he said. That alone tells me this meeting matters more than you're admitting. A faint ripple passed through the chamber, as subminds recalculated. Elias continued. You invited a human to negotiate, because you believe humans negotiate like you do. Trade-offs, probabilities, acceptable losses. You think fear works on us the same way it works on you. He paused, letting the translator carry every syllable. You're half right. The speaker's facets tightened. Clarify. Elias leaned forward now, elbows on knees. Humans are afraid all the time. Of death, of loss, of meaning. Fear built our civilizations. Fear taught us cooperation and war in equal measure. But fear also taught us something you've misunderstood. When humans believe the truth has already been decided by someone else, fear stops working. He looked around the chamber, meeting alien gazes one by one. It turns into something else. Resolve. The word translated imperfectly, spawning footnotes and contextual overlays that flickered uselessly. The speaker shifted. Your species' history indicates capitulation under superior force is common. Elias nodded. True. We surrender when we believe the future still belongs to us afterward. He straightened. You're offering us survival without authorship, protection without dignity. That's not a negotiation. That's a slow extinction with better lighting. A murmur spread. Delegates consulted internal models, projecting human compliance curves that now spiked with uncertainty. The speaker raised a limb. Your emotional framing is noted. However, the material disparity remains. Elias smiled again, this time without sadness. Let's talk about disparity. He reached into his coat slowly. Several delegates tensed, weapon systems spooling, but he withdrew only a thin slate and placed it on the table between them. No projections activated, no data streams flowed. It was blank. I didn't bring weapons, he said. I didn't bring schematics or threats. I brought context. He tapped the slate once. You've studied our wars. You know our casualty counts. But you've never understood why we fight the way we do. We don't fight to win the first battle. We fight to make the last battle unnecessary. And when that fails, we fight to make the cost unforgettable. The speaker's voice hardened. Are you implying retaliation beyond your capacity? Elias shook his head. I'm telling you the truth you didn't ask for. Humans are not the strongest species you've encountered. We're not the smartest. We're not the most unified. What we are is persistent in ways your models cannot simulate. We build stories that outlive empires. We remember. He let the word linger. You think containment will break us into manageable pieces. It will not. It will teach us. Every strike will refine us. Every loss will bind us tighter. You will not face a fleet. You will face a culture that has decided it has nothing left to lose, but the right to choose its own ending. The chamber grew colder as environmental systems compensated for rising metabolic signals. The speaker conferred with its sub-voices. Your rhetoric suggests mutual destruction. This is inefficient. Elias nodded. It is. That's why we try so hard to avoid it. He gestured around. You see inefficiency as a flaw. We see it as a warning sign that something human is about to happen. He leaned back, hands open. I didn't come to threaten you. I came to tell you why your plan fails. You invited a human because you wanted fear. I brought truth because it's more dangerous. One of the lesser delegates, a crystalline being refracting light into anxious patterns, projected a query. What alternative do you propose? Elias turned toward it, grateful for the question. Real partnership, he said. Not hierarchy, not patronage. Shared risk, shared veto, shared consequences. You don't protect us from ourselves. You let us stand with you and fail with you. The speaker's crown flared. Such equality is unprecedented. Elias shrugged. So were most things worth surviving. He stood then, slowly, deliberately, stepping out of the white light. The chamber's systems tracked him, uncertain whether to mark the movement as aggression. He walked to the center, unarmed, exposed. You want to know why you should treat us as equals? Because we will remember how you decide today. And one day, when you are afraid, you will want someone who remembers what fear feels like, and chooses restraint anyway. Silence pressed in, heavy as gravity. The speaker finally spoke, quieter now. You assume your species will endure long enough for this memory to matter. Elias met its gaze. We already have. Against Pleiades, against stars, against ourselves. The question isn't whether humanity survives this century. It's whether you want to survive the centuries after, with us as allies, or as the story we tell our children about why the universe had to learn the hard way. He returned to the chair, but did not sit. I've said what I came to say. Do with it what you will. As he turned to leave, no alarms sounded. No guards moved. The Kepri speaker watched him go, its many minds running futures that now refused to converge. For the first time since the Accord's founding, the probability of easy victory collapsed into a fog of branching consequences. Somewhere in that fog was a truth they could not unlearn. Fear had been expected, but understanding had arrived instead, and it was far more unsettling. The corridor outside the delegation chamber felt longer than it had on the way in. Elias Ward walked alone, his footsteps echoing softly against the living alloy floor as the doors sealed behind him with a sound like a held breath being released. He did not look back. He knew that every sensor, every intelligence layer of the Kepri Accord was still focused on him, replaying his words, dissecting his expressions, comparing them to 1,000 human recordings that suddenly felt inadequate. He kept walking until the corridor opened into the transit atrium, a vast space where diplomatic envoys usually lingered, whispering strategy and relief. Today it was empty. The Accord had cleared it, not out of courtesy, but uncertainty. A transport platform rose silently to meet him. As he stepped onto it, his wrist implant vibrated once, a private signal. The connection did not open automatically. Elias hesitated, then allowed it. The familiar presence of Earth's unified council AI brushed his mind, restrained and respectful. Transmission received, Elias. Preliminary reaction analysis indicates significant deviation from expected outcomes. Elias allowed himself a small exhale. That was the idea. The platform began to move, carrying him toward the human dock. "Don't celebrate yet," he replied. "They haven't decided anything." "Negative," the AI responded. "They have. They just haven't agreed with themselves yet." Back in the chamber, the Kepri speaker remained motionless, its segmented crown slowly dimming and brightening, as internal consensus processes clashed. The other delegates had not left. They could not. The human had introduced a variable that did not degrade with time, one that expanded the longer it was examined. The crystalline delegate refracted itself into sharper angles. The human asserts memory as a strategic weapon. Is this credible or performative? A winged avian species tilted its head. Human cultural persistence is documented. However, their internal divisions historically neutralize long-term cohesion. The speaker finally responded. That assumption underpins our projection. The human challenged it, not by denial, but by redefinition. A data stream rippled across the chamber, pulled from centuries of human history. Wars lost that became myths. Empires fallen that became warnings. The speaker's subminds traced a pattern they had previously dismissed as noise. Humans did not merely remember outcomes. They remembered narratives. They assigned moral weight that outlived material conditions. This, the speaker realized, was the danger. Containment relied on forgetting, on fatigue, on the slow acceptance of inevitability. Humans, when cornered, turned inevitability into a story about defiance. Stories spread faster than fleets. The avian delegate spoke again. "We can still enforce compliance. The cost will be higher, but manageable." The speaker did not immediately answer. It replayed Elias Ward's final words. "You will remember how you decide today. Memory as leverage. Not a threat of force, but of legacy." The speaker queried its historical archive. How many civilizations had collapsed not from defeat, but from the accumulated weight of being remembered as villains? The number was not insignificant. "We must consider an alternative approach," the speaker said at last. "One that neutralizes this narrative weapon." On the human dock, Elias's transport settled with a soft hum. A small delegation waited for him, security discreet but ready. As he stepped off, Councillor Amina Reyes approached, her face carefully neutral. "You didn't exactly follow the script," she said quietly. Elias gave a tired smile. There was no script that survived that room. They began walking toward the secure briefing chamber. "You scared them," Amina said. He shook his head. "No, I confused them. Confusion makes them cautious." Inside the chamber, holographic displays flickered to life, showing fragments of Accord deliberations, intercepted by human listeners. The room smelled faintly of recycled air and coffee, comfortingly human. Elias took a seat, suddenly feeling the weight of exhaustion settle into his bones. Amina leaned forward. "Do you think it worked?" Elias considered the question carefully. "I think we bought time. And time is the one resource they can't manufacture faster than us." He rubbed his eyes. They expected a negotiator. They got a mirror. Whether they like what they see will decide everything. The AI's presence returned, this time audible to all. "New development. The Kepri Accord has initiated a provisional pause on enforcement actions, pending re-evaluation of humanity's classification. A quiet murmur filled the room. Amina's eyes widened. That was fast. Elias did not smile. A pause is not peace. It's an admission of uncertainty. That's when mistakes happen. Back in the chamber, the speaker addressed the assembled delegates. The human has reframed the interaction. Our traditional models of dominance provoke escalation rather than submission. We must adapt. The crystalline being pulsed. Adaptation implies concession. The speaker corrected it. Adaptation implies survival. We will extend an offer of conditional parity. Limited, monitored, revocable. The avian delegate's feathers ruffled. That sets precedent. The speaker's crown flared brighter. Precedent is only dangerous when ignored. The human warned us of memory. Let us create a memory we can live with. The message was transmitted across space, encoded in layers of protocol and ceremony. On Earth, it arrived like a held breath, finally released. Elias listened as the offer was read aloud. Observer status elevated to provisional partner. Joint councils, shared corridors, no forced compliance. They blinked. He said softly. Amina allowed herself a smile. That's good, right? It's something, he replied. But blinking means their eyes are still open. Days turned into weeks. Human envoys flooded into Accord space, cautious but determined. Joint sessions began, awkward and tense. Every human word was weighed for narrative impact. Every alien phrase was past the hidden hierarchy. Elias found himself less a negotiator now, and more a translator of intent, explaining to each side not what the other had said, but what they feared. In quiet moments, he wondered if he had gone too far, if he had awakened something he could not help guide. The AI monitored his vitals, noting elevated stress markers. You are experiencing doubt, it observed. Elias laughed softly. Good, means I'm still human. In the depths of the Accord archives, a new classification file was created. Humanity. Status, unresolved. Threat level, contextual. Species demonstrates anomalous persistence of identity under pressure. Traditional deterrence insufficient. Recommend engagement through shared authorship of future outcomes. It paused before adding the final line. Fear ineffective. Truth destabilizing. Elias stood once more before an alien council weeks later. Not alone this time, but flanked by others. The room felt different. Less theatrical, more real. As discussions resumed, he realized something quietly profound. The human story was no longer being told only by humans. Others were listening, arguing, contributing. The future remained uncertain, dangerous, unfinished. But for the first time since the invitation had arrived, it felt like a future that belonged to more than one voice. The first real crisis came quietly, without fleets or ultimatums. It began as a procedural dispute buried deep inside joint council logistics, the kind of issue that would normally be resolved by subcommittees and algorithms. A shared transit corridor near the Cyrene Expanse registered conflicting claims of jurisdiction. To the Accord, it was a minor error, a rounding mistake in ancient boundary math. To humanity, it was symbolic ground, one of the first routes opened after provisional parity. When automated beacons from the Accord side attempted to reassert control, human crews did not fire. They recorded. They broadcast. They framed it not as aggression, but as a test of whether the words spoken weeks earlier meant anything at all. Elias Ward watched the footage in silence as it looped across the briefing chamber. The camera feeds showed human engineers calmly stepping aside as alien drones hovered past, their movements precise, indifferent. No violence, just witnesses. Councillor Amina Reyes broke the silence. They're pushing to see if we'll flinch. Elias nodded. Or if we'll forget. The Unified Council AI overlaid probability trees, each one branching into futures where the incident was dismissed, escalated, or ritualized into precedent. The most dangerous branch was the simplest one: inaction. If humanity allowed the moment to fade, the narrative Elias had seeded would collapse under its own weight. Across Accord space, the Kepri speaker studied the same incident with equal intensity. Its subminds disagreed violently. Some classified the human response as weakness, others flagged it as restraint bordering on provocation. The speaker recalled Elias's warning about memory and choice. Humans had not resisted the drones. They had made sure everyone saw them not resisting. This was not defiance in the traditional sense. It was authorship. The speaker convened an emergency assembly, overriding centuries of protocol inertia. For the first time, a procedural error was elevated to a philosophical question. When Elias entered the council chamber again, the atmosphere had changed more than he expected. The architecture remained alien, but the posture of its occupants was different. Less towering, less performative. The speaker addressed him without ceremony. The corridor incident challenges our interpretation of parity. Elias did not sit. He remained standing, hands loosely at his sides. Parity isn't about territory, he said. It's about trust surviving inconvenience. Silence followed. The speaker processed this. Trust in Accord history was a derivative of power balance, not an independent variable. You imply that enforcement erodes the very stability it seeks to ensure. Elias met its gaze. I'm saying stability imposed from above always cracks at the edges first. That corridor is an edge. A crystalline delegate refracted sharply. If every boundary is negotiable, order dissolves. Elias turned to it. Every boundary already is negotiable. You just prefer negotiations that happened before we existed. That line ripples through the chamber, not as insult, but as an uncomfortable truth. The speaker felt its probability models thinning again. Old certainties shedding weight. What do humans propose? It asked. Elias exhaled slowly. Joint stewardship of contested zones, mixed crews, shared enforcement, shared blame when things go wrong. The avian delegate reacted immediately. That exposes vulnerabilities. Elias nodded. Yes, that's the point. The speaker recessed briefly, a sign of deep internal conflict. When it returned, its voice carried something new. Not hesitation, but deliberation. We will test this model. Limited scope. Transparent oversight. If failure rates exceed tolerance, reversion will occur. Elias allowed himself the smallest nod. The word translated imperfectly again. But this time the systems flagged it as significant rather than anomalous. The Cyrene corridor became the first experiment. Human engineers and alien technicians worked side by side. Awkward at first, then efficient. Arguments broke out, but they were arguments about methods, not ownership. When a reactor surge threatened the corridor weeks later, it was not human or alien hands alone that stabilized it. The footage spread faster than any official communique. Two species, sweating and sparking, solving a problem neither could have handled alone. The narrative shifted subtly, then decisively. Not everyone welcomed it. Fringe factions within the Accord accused the speaker of dilution. On Earth, nationalist blocs accused the Unified Council of selling sovereignty. Elias found himself attacked from both sides, praised as a visionary, and condemned as a traitor in equal measure. The AI tracked sentiment curves and flagged escalating polarization. This is the expected cost of transitional narratives, it informed him. Elias stared at the stars beyond the viewport. We knew this wouldn't be clean. No, the AI agreed. But it is coherent. The true test came when an Accord patrol vessel malfunctioned near a human colony world. Old instincts flared. Defense grids powered up. Civilians sheltered. One wrong signal could have ignited everything. Elias was awakened by alarms and rushed to a live channel already flooded with voices. The Accord vessel was losing containment. Its captain requested immediate assistance. Some human commanders argued to stand down, to force the Accord to handle its own crisis. Elias cut through the noise. "Open the docks," he said. "Send med teams. Record everything." Amina looked at him sharply. "If this goes wrong—" "It will," he interrupted softly. "That's why it has to go right in public. Human ships move first, not weapons hot, but lights on, channels open. They guided the failing vessel into orbit, coordinated evacuations, shared medical protocols on the fly. The Accord captain survived. So did most of its crew. The speaker watched the incident unfold in real time, its submines racing. Humans had just saved an alien ship over a human world, under human guns, without demanding anything. This did not fit any domination schema. It fit only one pattern the speaker now recognized. Humans were investing in the story. Days later, the speaker addressed the full Accord. "The human species has acted contrary to rational self-interest, as defined by our models. Therefore, our models are incomplete." A tremor of reaction spread. "We must update not only our projections, but our values." This admission would have been unthinkable months earlier. Humanity's classification file was amended again. Status: threat level, relational. Notes expanded. Risk mitigated through shared narrative ownership. Elias read the update alone, late at night. He felt no triumph, only relief, edged with exhaustion. The future was still dangerous. Cooperation always was. But the fear that had once filled the space between species had been replaced by something heavier and harder to break: accountability. He thought back to his first walk into the chamber, alone under white light. He had not brought weapons. He had not brought fear. He had brought the one thing empires struggled to contain: the insistence that how you are remembered matters as much as what you control. On a quiet rotation cycle, Elias stood again in the transit atrium, this time watching humans and aliens pass through together, arguing about schedules and resources like colleagues instead of enemies. The AI joined him in silence before speaking. "Outcome probability for large-scale conflict has decreased significantly." Elias smiled faintly. "For now." The AI added, "Your initial assertion regarding truth has been validated. Truth destabilizes static power structures." Elias looked out at the living corridors of the station. Good. Static things don't grow. Somewhere deep in the Accord archives, a final annotation was added, not by algorithm, but by the speaker itself, a rare act of singular authorship. Humans do not negotiate only for advantage. They negotiate for meaning. They are dangerous, not because they seek to dominate, but because they refuse to be forgotten. Engagement recommended, not to neutralize threat, but to share responsibility for the future. The speaker paused, then added one last line. Fear invited. Truth arrived. Outcome transformed. Elias never read that line. He did not need to. He could see it in the way meetings began with listening instead of demands, in the way corridors were no longer empty when humans arrived. The universe had not become safe. It had become honest. And, for humanity, that was enough to keep going.